Sometimes you just want a darker background in your painting, but then you realize that the figure you're painting has many random shapes, like crazy flying hairs, for example. So the question is, should I paint the subject first or background first? And what should I do to make it more natural and cinematic looking instead of a stiff cutout? In this video, I want to share with you my tips on these questions. This angry looking girl I'm sketching here is Eris from Mushoku Tensei, or Jobless Reincarnation. She's a fierce little girl who loves to yell at people with rage, and this is one of the many scenes that she's acting up. As usual, let's start with the sketch digitally. Her emotion is the key for this painting to work, so make sure you get her angry look and her body position correct. She's charging forward with her head leaning ahead of her body, so proportionally her head looks bigger than when you look at her straight on. For her hair, I didn't put in too much detail, especially for the ones behind her body. I wanted to leave to the watercolor stage, so I can put in the hair strands more freely, more random, indicating the movements. Also remember to check the mirror image. Sometimes the proportion might be off because you're so used to this view and you don't realize it. It's hard to notice until you flip it. Also, I changed the composition from vertical to horizontal. I think this gives us a more cinematic look and more room to play with for the background and her flying hair. After transferring it from the printout to my watercolor paper, I started with a quick first wash of the skin. There's no need to go into too much details here. All I wanted to do here is so that I can easily see where her skins are, so I can avoid painting over it and making it looking dirty. Since watercolor is transparent, any stroke that dried up will be hard to correct, and if you layer too much, it'll become muddy looking. Once the wash for the skin is dried, I started with the background. Apparently, I forgot to press the record button for the first few seconds, but what I did here was simply adding a few rough brushstrokes around her hair, on dry paper so you can see the brush marks. They were done with an upward direction to pull the paint away from her head. Be careful not to get too much darker color on her hair, and only make it darker where her hair will be in shadow. And for the area overlapping her hair, keep it softer or lighter color. Once we finish the background layer, we'll be able to paint over it with individual strands of the hair. Here I use a dark red and brownish color with strong granulation property to add more texture to the background. I also used a lot of water to make the paint move more to create those beautiful patterns, and I'm flipping the paper upside down to direct the paint to go upwards of the painting to make it more natural looking, adding to the atmosphere. While the paints are still wet, I kept adding paint and water until I'm satisfied with the look. So that was the background. While waiting for it to dry, I moved back to painting darker tones and shadows on her skin and her eyes. She's wearing a white dress, so I can leave most of the dress unpainted and use the white of the paper. To indicate the shadows, I used a gray paint with some blue tone. Now the background is dry. I switched to a larger brush with sharp taper end to paint her hair. Since there are a lot of hair in this painting, a larger brush is very handy because it holds a lot more paint, so I can keep painting longer without moving the brush away from the paper to reload. This helps to avoid the dried, hard edges that we don't want. I use a dark warm red for her hair with very little water, just enough to get the paint moving. This is because I wanted to preserve the strength of the red so it pops better on the background. To get the maximum movements, move the paintbrush in different directions, not only with your fingers, but also with your arm and wrist. In terms of how to paint the hair strands and where do they all go, I find it helpful if you imagine in your mind how the hair moves when the person is running towards you or when the wind is blowing the hair upwards. You don't need to be too precise here. The messy hair adds atmosphere and motion, which is exactly what we wanted. We can add more details later to tighten it up, but here we just want it to be free. For the hair in the back, keep the edges soft so they can merge into the background and look more natural. Now you probably noticed that I move around the painting and only work on the area that have already dried. While her hair is drying, I move back to her cloth to add more dark details. I had to be pretty careful not to touch the paper around her hair, which is still pretty wet. Now I'm adding details to her hair. Watercolor dries lighter, so the strong red I used before doesn't look strong enough now. This is good, because the strands in the back are farther away from us, and also because there are so much movements, the strands that are moving will be blurry in real life. So this lighter layer is perfect for capturing those. Also because we cut the edges softer for some strands in the back, it naturally melts into the background. I'm now adding stronger strands on top with a stronger red, with more controlled brush strokes and also with more careful planning. Finally, I'm observing the painting as a whole and adding more details here and there. There's so much crazy hair going on in this painting, so it's kinda hard to stop, but I try not to overwork it. I switch back to a smaller brush to add some fine highlights to her hair, her eyes, and her face with white ink. And this is it. How to capture motion of hair and how to merge character with background naturally. I hope you find it helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me some comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.